I'm Sarah Mitchell, and at 45 years old, I never imagined I'd be the type of person who would find her parents' darkest secret crumpled up in a kitchen drawer like a forgotten grocery list. But there I was, standing in my childhood home on Maple Street, holding foreclosure papers that made my hands shake so violently I could barely read the numbers. The familiar scent of my mother's lavender sachets filled the air around me as I stared at documents that changed everything I thought I saw. Knew about my family. Mom had asked me to help organize some important papers while she was at her weekly hair appointment at Betty's salon. "Just sort through that drawer, honey," she had said casually, waving her hand toward the kitchen. "Throw away anything that looks like junk mail." But this wasn't junk mail. This was a nightmare printed on official bank letterhead. My chest tightened as I read the bold letters across the top. Final notice of foreclosure proceedings. The amount made my stomach drop, like I was falling from a great height. $100,000. My parents owed the bank $100,000, and they had exactly 60 days before losing the house where I'd grown up, where I'd learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where Mom had bandaged my scraped knees and Dad had taught me to change a tire. I sank into one of the mismatched kitchen chairs, the same ones we'd had since I was 12. The yellow wallpaper with tiny roses seemed to mock me. Everything looked exactly the same as it always had, but nothing would ever be the same again. My breathing became shallow and quick. How could they be in this much trouble? Dad had always prided himself on being financially responsible. He'd lectured me about saving money since I was old enough to count. The papers were dated 3 months ago. 3 entire months they'd been living with this hanging over their heads, and they'd said nothing, not one word. Instead, they'd continued their usual routine. Dad playing cards at the community center every Tuesday and Thursday. Mom hosting her book club meetings in the living room every other Wednesday. They'd acted like everything was perfectly normal, while their world was crumbling around them. I rifled through more papers in the drawer, my heart hammering against my ribs. Credit card statements with minimum payments circled in red ink. A letter from Dad's pension fund about reduced monthly payments. Medical bills from Mom's surgery last year that insurance had only partially covered. Each piece of paper was another, weight pressing down on my chest. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the realization that they'd been suffering in silence. My parents, who had always seemed so strong and capable, had been drowning while putting on a brave face for everyone around them, including me, especially me. I thought about all the times in recent months when I'd offered to help with groceries or household repairs, and they'd brushed me off. "We're fine, sweetheart," Mom would always say. "You worry too much." Dad would nod along, changing the subject to ask about my job at the accounting firm, or whether I was dating anyone new. Now I understood why Dad had seemed more irritable lately, snapping at the television during the news, or complaining about kids these days who don't understand hard work. I understood why Mom had been quieter during our weekly phone calls, always cutting them short with some excuse about needing to start dinner or water her garden. My throat felt dry as sandpaper. The house was so quiet I could hear the old grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the same steady rhythm that had marked time throughout my entire childhood. But time was running out now. 60 days wasn't long enough to figure out how to help them without losing everything I'd worked for myself. I carefully folded the papers and put them back exactly where I'd found them, my hands still trembling. They couldn't know that I knew. Not yet. They'd hidden this from me for months, which meant they either didn't trust me enough to share their burden, or they were too proud to ask for help. Either way, telling them I'd discovered their secret would only make them feel worse. Walking out of that kitchen felt like leaving behind the last pieces of my innocent belief that my parents had everything under control. The screen door squeaked. As I stepped onto the front porch, the same sound it had made for decades. Mrs. Patterson was watering her flower boxes across the street, and she waved at me with her usual friendly smile. I managed to wave back, but my smile felt like it might crack my face in half. As I drove home to my small apartment on the other side of town, one thought kept spinning through my mind like a broken record. I had to find a way to save their house. I didn't know how, and I didn't know where I'd get that kind of money, but I knew with absolute certainty that I couldn't let them lose the home where they'd built their entire life together. The steering wheel felt slippery under my sweaty palms as I pulled into my parking space. Looking up at my modest apartment building, I realized my comfortable little life was about to change completely. Because no matter what it took, no matter what I had to sacrifice, I was going to make sure my parents never found out how close they'd come to losing everything. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and calculator, working by the light of a single lamp. The glow from the screen made everything feel surreal as I started researching second jobs, side hustles, anything that could help me earn the money they needed. My coffee grew cold as I calculated and recalculated, but one thing became crystal clear. Saving my parents' house was going to require everything I had to give. The alarm screamed at 4:30 a.m., but I was already awake, staring at the ceiling and calculating numbers in my head. 43 days left, $100,000 needed, 3 jobs starting today. My body ached before I even got out of bed. The past 2 weeks had been a blur of job applications, interviews, and sleepless nights planning every detail of my secret mission. Nobody could know what I was doing, especially not my parents, who continued their daily routine completely unaware that their daughter was about to turn her life upside down to save theirs. I stumbled to the bathroom and caught my reflection in the mirror. Dark circles under my eyes made me look older than my 45 years. My brown hair needed a trim, but that was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. Every penny had to count now. My regular job at Henderson and Associates accounting firm started at 8 a.m. I'd been their administrative assistant for 8 years, handling client files and managing appointments. Mr. Henderson had always been fair, to me, giving me steady raises and treating me with respect. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days organizing other people's financial documents while my own family's finances were falling apart. But now I had 2 additional jobs. The night shift at Murphy's 24-hour diner started at 11 p.m. and ran until 6 a.m. on weekends. The weekend job caring for elderly residents at Sunset Manor would eat up my Saturdays and Sundays. Between all 3 jobs, I'd calculated I could potentially earn enough in 4 months to cover the debt. If I didn't spend money on anything except absolute necessities, my hands shook as I made my morning coffee. Not from caffeine withdrawal, but from exhaustion and fear. What if I couldn't pull this off? What if I collapsed from the stress? What if my parents found out and felt humiliated that their daughter was sacrificing everything to fix their mistakes? The worst part was pretending everything was normal around them. 2 days ago, I'd had my usual Sunday dinner at their house. Dad complained about his arthritis while Mom fussed over whether the pot roast was too dry. They looked older to me now, more fragile, and I kept thinking about those foreclosure papers hidden in the kitchen drawer. "You look tired, sweetheart," Mom had said, reaching across the table to touch my forehead like she used to when I was sick as a child. "Are you sleeping enough?" I'd forced a smile and lied through my teeth. Just busy with work stuff, nothing to worry about. If only she knew that while she was concerned about my sleep, I was lying awake every night figuring out how to save her home. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend Lisa. "Haven't seen you at dance class in weeks. Everything." "Okay." I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "Just taking a break. Talk soon." Another lie. The truth was, I'd canceled my beloved Wednesday night dance classes to save $60 a month. Those classes had been my one indulgence, the 2 hours each week when I felt graceful and free. Now they were a luxury I couldn't justify. I quote D. Already started selling my possessions. My grandmother's antique jewelry box brought in $300. The collection of first edition books I'd been gathering for years sold for $800. Each item I parted with felt like giving away a piece of myself, but every dollar brought me closer to saving my parents' house. The hardest thing to sell had been my grandmother's ring, a simple gold band with a small sapphire that she'd given me before she passed away 10 years ago. The pawn shop owner had examined it with his magnifying glass while I fought back tears. "It's not worth much," he'd said dismissively. "Maybe 200? I'd walked out of that shop with cash in my pocket and an emptiness in my chest that still hadn't gone away. But $200 was $200 closer to 100,000. My neighbors started noticing changes too. Mrs. Peterson, from across the hall, mentioned that she hadn't seen me bringing in grocery bags like usual. "I'm eating healthier," I'd explained, which was technically true if you counted surviving on peanut butter sandwiches and instant ramen as healthy. The physical exhaustion was manageable, but the emotional weight was crushing. Every day I watched my parents go about their lives, Dad reading his newspaper and complaining about politics, Mom tending to her garden and chatting with neighbors. While knowing they were living on borrowed time. Yesterday, I'd overheard Mom on the phone with her sister, my Aunt Carol in Chicago. "Sarah seems distant lately," she was saying. "I wonder if she's having problems at work or maybe man trouble. You know how she gets when she's stressed." I'd stood in their hallway, listening to my mother worry about me while I was secretly working myself to the bone to save her. The guilt was suffocating. They thought I was pulling away from them when really I was sacrificing everything for them. But there was no other choice. In 38 days, the bank would begin foreclosure proceedings unless someone came up with $100,000. My parents didn't have it. They couldn't get a loan with their credit situation, and they were too proud to ask for help even if they knew they needed it. So it had to be me. It had to be done in secret, and it had to work. As I locked my apartment door and headed to another 14-hour day, I whispered a prayer to whatever powers might be listening. "Please let this be enough. Please let me save them." The morning air was crisp against my face, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the sound of my parents' neighborhood waking up. Lawn mowers starting, dogs barking, children getting ready for school. Normal sounds of a normal day. But nothing about my life was normal anymore, and I was just getting started. The sound of slot machines echoing through my phone made my blood run cold. I pressed my ear closer to the bathroom door at my parents' house, listening to my father's hushed conversation with someone I didn't recognize. "I know I owe more than we agreed," Dad whispered urgently. "But I need another week. My daughter doesn't know about any of this." My stomach dropped like a stone. I'd come over to help Mom with her grocery shopping, but now I was frozen in their hallway, discovering that everything I thought I knew was wrong. "The house payment can wait," he continued. "But you guys don't wait. I understand that." I stumbled backward, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. For 6 weeks, I'd been destroying myself working 3 jobs, selling everything I owned, surviving on 3 hours of sleep a night. All to pay what I thought was a simple case of financial mismanagement. But this wasn't about medical bills or reduced pension payments. This was about gambling debts. My legs felt weak as I made my way to the kitchen, pretending to look for a glass of water while my mind raced. Dad ended his call and walked in a minute later, his face pale and drawn. "You okay, sweetheart? You look upset." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and demand answers. Instead, I forced myself to smile. Just tired from work. That afternoon, I drove straight to the Cherokee Nation Casino, 40 minutes outside town. I'd never been there before, never had any interest in gambling, but I needed to understand what I was really dealing with. The place was massive, flashing lights, ringing bells, and the constant electronic melody of hope and desperation. I walked through the maze of slot machines and card tables, watching people my parents' age feeding bills into machines with glazed expressions at the customer service desk, I asked about their loan program. The woman behind the counter, wearing a name tag that said Beverly, looked at me sympathetically. "Honey, you look worried. Someone in your family having trouble?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Happens more than you'd think," she said quietly. "Good people get in over their heads. Your daddy owes about $50,000 to us, if you're asking about Frank Mitchell." $50,000. Half of the total debt was from this place. "He's been coming here for about 2 years," Beverly continued. "Started small like they all do. But when you're on a fixed income and you hit a bad streak..." I drove home in a daze. 2 years. While I'd been worrying about Dad seeming more irritable, while Mom had been making excuses for their tighter budget, he'd been secretly gambling away their future. That night, I sat in my car outside their house for an hour, just staring at the warm light glowing through their kitchen window. I could see Mom washing dishes, Dad reading his paper at the table, the same scene I'd witnessed thousands of times growing up. But now it felt like watching strangers. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was realizing that even if I managed to pay off every penny of their debt, there was nothing stopping Dad from gambling it all away again. I could work myself into the ground, sacrifice my health and happiness, and wake up in 6 months to find them in the exact same situation. My phone rang, startling me. It was Mom. "Sweetheart, I saw your car outside. Are you coming in?" "Just finishing up a work call," I lied, my voice surprisingly steady. "Well, come on in when you're done. I made your favorite chocolate chip cookies." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. She was making me cookies while I was sitting in my car trying to figure out how to save them from a mess they'd created and hidden from me. As I walked up their front steps, breathing in the familiar scent of Mom's baking, I made a decision that terrified me. I was still going to save their house. But I was also going to have to figure out how to save Dad from himself. Because paying off a debt was one thing. Paying off a gambling addiction was something else entirely. The question that kept me awake that night wasn't whether I could earn $100,000 in time. It was whether saving them was even possible at all. The coffee mug slipped from my hands and shattered against the linoleum floor of Murphy's Diner. It was 3 a.m., and I'd been on my feet for 19 hours straight between my 3 jobs. My body was shutting down, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. "Easy there, hon," said Dolores, the night shift manager. "You've been pushing too hard." I knelt to clean up the mess, my hands shaking from exhaustion. "I'm fine, just clumsy." But I wasn't fine. In the past month, I'd lost 12 pounds I couldn't afford to lose. My hair was falling out in clumps. I'd collapsed twice, once at Henderson and Associates, and once in my own apartment. The only thing keeping me going was the progress. I'd managed to save $38,000. It wasn't enough, but it was something. "Sarah, honey?" I looked up to find Mrs. Patterson from across the street standing at the diner counter. At 4 a.m., she looked as put together as always, her silver hair neatly pinned and her kind eyes full of concern. "What are you doing here?" I asked, genuinely confused. "I could ask you the same thing. I've been watching you leave your apartment at all hours. 3 different uniforms, 3 different jobs." She sat down on a stool and folded her hands. "I wasn't born yesterday, sweetheart." My throat tightened. "Mrs. Patterson, I can't really talk about... Your parents are about to lose their house." The words hit me like a slap. I stared at her, speechless. "Frank borrowed money from some dangerous people at that casino. Your mother doesn't even know the worst of it." She leaned closer. "But I know what you've been doing to try to save them." "How do you..." "Because I've been in your shoes, honey. 40 years ago, I worked 4 jobs to pay off my husband's drinking debts. Nearly killed myself doing it." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you." Inside was a check for $5,000. "I can't take this," I whispered. "Yes, you can, because sometimes angels don't have wings. They have savings accounts." Her eyes were fierce with determination. "And because your parents have been telling everyone in the neighborhood that you're lazy and don't help them financially." The betrayal hit me harder than physical pain. While I was destroying my health to save them, they were destroying my reputation. "Well, Mrs. Patterson, there's more." She pulled out her phone and showed me a text message. "This is from Janet Miller at the post office. She overheard your mother telling Betty at the salon that you're still single at 45 and living paycheck to paycheck like a teenager." Each word felt like a knife twisting in my chest. "And this morning," Mrs. Patterson continued, "I heard your father tell Bob Henderson that you've never offered to help with anything and probably wouldn't even come to their funerals." I gripped the counter to keep from falling. All those sleepless nights, all those sacrifices, all that love. And they were using me as their excuse for why they looked like failures to their friends. "Why are you telling me this?" I managed to ask. "Because you deserve to know who you're really saving." She stood up and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "And because you deserve better than parents who throw you under the bus to save their own pride." After she left, I stood in that empty diner at 4 a.m., holding a check from a woman who barely knew me but cared more about my well-being than my own parents did. For the first time since finding those foreclosure papers, I wondered if I was fighting for the wrong thing. But even as that thought crossed my mind, I folded the check carefully and put it in my pocket. $43,000 down, 57 to go. Because despite everything, they were still my parents. Even if I was starting to realize they'd never really been the parents I deserved. My knees buckled in the parking lot of First National Bank, and I barely caught myself against my car door. The statement in my trembling hands showed the impossible truth. My parents' account had a new debt of $25,000 dated just 3 days ago. 3 days. After I'd secretly transferred $40,000 to pay off their original mortgage debt, Dad had gone back to the casino and lost $25,000 more in 3 days. The pavement felt cold against my palms as I struggled to breathe. 8 weeks of killing myself. 8 weeks of 3 hours of sleep. Surviving on crackers and water, selling everything I owned, including my grandmother's wedding ring. 8 weeks of my parents telling neighbors I was worthless while I sacrificed my health to save them. And he'd gambled it all away in 72 hours. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Sarah, haven't seen you lately. Are you avoiding us? We're worried about you pulling away from family." I stared at the message until the words blurred together. They were worried about me pulling away while Dad was literally gambling away my sacrifice faster than I could earn it. The bank manager, Mr. Rodriguez, found me 20 minutes later, still sitting on the pavement beside my car. He'd helped me set up the wire transfer last week, and now he was looking at me with the kind of pity reserved for lost causes. "Miss Mitchell, are you all right?" He knew. The words came out as barely a whisper. They both knew what I was doing. And he kept gambling anyway. Mr. Rodriguez helped me to my feet. "Ma'am, I don't understand. My father has a gambling addiction. I've been working 3 jobs for 2 months to pay off their debts, and he just threw it all away." I laughed, but it sounded more like crying. "They think I'm lazy. They tell everyone I don't help them, but I've been dying to save them and they don't even care." The truth hit me like a physical blow. They knew. They had to know. There was no way my sudden absence from family dinners, my obvious exhaustion, my weight loss, none of it went unnoticed. They'd chosen to let me destroy myself while maintaining their lie that I was the problem child. That night, I called in sick to all 3 jobs for the first time in 8 weeks. I sat on my apartment floor, surrounded by the few possessions I hadn't sold yet, and tried to remember who I used to be before I became someone willing to die for people who wouldn't cross the street to save me. My phone rang. Dad's number. Sarah, your mother's worried sick. You missed our Sunday dinner without calling. Did you know? My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. About what I've been doing? Silence stretched between us like a canyon. Dad, did you know I've been working 3 jobs to pay your gambling debts? Sarah, I don't know what you're talking about. But his voice cracked on the lie, and we both heard it. I found the foreclosure papers 8 weeks ago. I've earned over $40,000 to save your house, and you went back to the casino 3 days after I paid off your debt. Sweetheart, don't. I closed my eyes. Just don't. I hung up and turned off my phone. For the first time in 2 months, my apartment was completely quiet. No alarm set for 4 a.m., no uniforms laid out for triple shifts, no calculator and budget spreadsheets covering my kitchen table. Just silence and the devastating realization that I'd been fighting a war where the people I was trying to save were actively working against me. The question wasn't whether I could earn enough money to save them anymore. The question was whether they were worth saving at all. The smell of Mom's roast chicken filled the kitchen, just like it had every Sunday for 45 years. But as I sat at the familiar table with its chipped blue plates and mismatched chairs, everything felt different. I felt different. 3 weeks had passed since I'd discovered Dad's latest gambling spree. 3 weeks since I'd realized they knew exactly what I'd been doing and chose to let me suffer in silence. 3 weeks of me working just my regular job and sleeping through the night for the first time in months. My brother Kevin sat across from me, visiting from Denver with his wife and 2 kids. He looked successful in his pressed khakis and polo shirt, every inch the accountant who'd made something of himself. Mom's favorite phrase when comparing us. Sarah looks tired, Kevin said, cutting his chicken with surgical precision. Are you taking care of yourself? Before I could answer, Dad jumped in. Your sister's been going through a phase. Antisocial behavior. Won't help with anything around here. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost admired it. That's not surprising, Kevin said, nodding sagely. Sarah's always been the irresponsible one. Mom dabbed her mouth with her napkin. We've tried to help her understand family obligations, but she just doesn't seem to care about anyone but herself. The words hung in the air like smoke. I set down my fork and looked around the table, at my parents who'd spent 2 months letting me nearly kill myself to save them, at my brother who'd never offered to help with anything but was quick to judge me for the same. Irresponsible, I repeated quietly. Now, Sarah, Mom said in her warning voice, don't get defensive. No, I want to understand. I kept my voice calm, controlled. Help me understand how I'm irresponsible. Dad's jaw tightened. You know what you've done. Or haven't done. Kevin leaned forward, clearly enjoying the drama. Mom and Dad have been struggling, and you've just ignored it. They could lose the house, Sarah. Something shifted inside my chest. Not anger, but something colder. Clearer. The house, I said slowly. You mean the one that had $100,000 debt 3 months ago? The kitchen went dead silent except for the tick of the old wall clock. The one with foreclosure papers hidden in Mom's kitchen drawer? I continued. The one I saved by working 70-hour weeks for 8 weeks? Straight? Mom's face went white. Sarah, what are you? The debt I paid off by selling Grandma's ring, by canceling my dance classes, by surviving on peanut butter sandwiches while you told the neighbors I was lazy. Dad started to stand. You don't understand the whole situation. Sit down, Dad. My voice cut through his protest like a blade. I understand perfectly. I understand that you owed $50,000 to the casino. I understand that you kept gambling while I was working 3 jobs to save you. And I understand that both of you knew exactly what I was doing while you let everyone think I was the family disappointment. Kevin's mouth fell open. Wait, what? I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, turning the screen toward the table. This is my account balance 3 months ago. This is what it looks like now. This is the wire transfer record showing $43,000 sent to First National Bank to pay your mortgage debt. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. The casino debt required a separate payment plan, I continued. $57,000 total. All of it paid by your irresponsible daughter who doesn't care about family. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Sarah, we never asked you to... No, you didn't ask. You just let me do it, while telling everyone I was worthless. I stood up, my legs steady for the first time in months. But here's what I've learned, Mom. A house isn't a home when the people in it don't love you back. And love isn't love when it only flows one direction. Dad finally found his voice. Sarah, you're our daughter. Of course we love you. No. I picked up my purse, feeling lighter than I had in years. You love what I can do for you. There's a difference. As I walked toward the door, Mom called after me. Where are you going? I turned back one last time, looking at the kitchen where I'd learned to cook, where I'd done homework at this same table, where I'd always believed I was loved unconditionally. Home, I said simply. To build one where I'm actually wanted. The screen door closed behind me with its familiar squeak, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't planning to come. The house was saved, but I was finally free. The morning sun streams through the windows of my small rental house on Elm Street, and I can hear Mrs. Patterson humming while she tends her roses next door. It's been 4 months since that Sunday dinner, and I'm finally learning what peace feels like. My kitchen table holds a cup of real coffee, not the instant stuff I survived on during those desperate weeks, and a letter from Sunset Manor offering me a full-time position as activities director. The elderly residents I'd cared for during my weekend shifts had requested me specifically. You understand what it means to give your heart to people who matter, Mrs. Henderson had written in her recommendation. I set the letter aside and lace up my dance shoes. Wednesday evening classes start in an hour, and I haven't missed a single session since I started again 2 months ago. My instructor, Maria, says I move differently now, with more confidence, like I finally know I deserve to take up space. The doorbell rings, and I find Kevin standing on my porch, looking uncomfortable, in his pressed shirt and tie. He's visited twice since that Sunday dinner, both times to apologize and both times asking the same question. How are Mom and Dad? He asks before I can even invite him in. They're fine, Kevin. The house is safe. Dad's in counseling for his gambling addiction, and they're managing their finances better. I lean against the doorframe, not moving to let him inside. But you could call them yourself to find out. I know, He shifts his weight. I keep thinking about what you did, how you saved them without anyone knowing. It makes me feel like a terrible son. You weren't the one calling me irresponsible while I worked myself to exhaustion, I say gently. And you weren't the one lying to neighbors about me while I was sacrificing everything to save them. But I believed it. I believed you were the problem without ever asking questions. I study my brother's face, seeing genuine remorse there. Kevin, I forgave them months ago. I forgave you too. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen or going back to the way things were. He nods slowly. They miss you. I miss them too. But I missed myself more. After Kevin leaves, I walk through my small house, taking inventory of my new life. The furniture is secondhand, the walls need paint, and the backyard is overgrown with weeds. But every item here was chosen by me, for me. The bookshelf holds novels I actually want to read. The refrigerator contains food I enjoy eating. The closet has clothes that make me feel confident instead of invisible. My phone buzzes with a text from Mom. Made your favorite cookies today, thinking of you. I smile and text back. That's sweet. I hope you enjoyed them. It's not cruel, but it's not an invitation either. We text occasionally now, surface-level conversations about weather and holidays. They know I'm safe and happy, and I know they're working on their problems. It's not the relationship any of us expected, but it's honest. At dance class, I partner with James, a widower who joined the class around the same time I returned. He's patient with my rusty steps and never asks why I stopped dancing for those months. We've been having coffee after class, talking about books and travel dreams and the small freedoms we've discovered in our middle age. You seem different. Tonight, he says as we practice a complicated turn sequence. Lighter somehow. I got a job offer, I tell him. Something that actually makes me happy. That's wonderful. When do you start? Monday. I'll be working with seniors, planning activities and outings. It pays less than my accounting job, but I can afford less now that I'm not supporting anyone else. He spins me gently, and I feel graceful again. Not because someone else needs me to be strong, but because I want to be. For myself, after class, I drive past my parents' house on the way home. The porch light is on, and I can see Dad reading in his chair by the window. Mom's silhouette moves around the kitchen, probably cleaning up after dinner. They look peaceful, and I'm genuinely glad. But I don't stop. I don't feel the old tug of obligation or the desperate need to check if they're okay. They're adults who are learning to take care of themselves, just like I am. At home, I pour a glass of wine and sit on my back steps, looking up at the stars. Mrs. Patterson's cat, Duchess, wanders over and rubs against my legs. I scratch behind her ears and she purrs loudly in the quiet evening. My phone rings. It's Lisa, my friend from the old dance class. Sarah, I heard you're back at Maria's studio. How does it feel? Like coming home, I say honestly. Like remembering who I was before I forgot I mattered. I'm so glad. You disappeared for a while. There, and I was worried. I was saving someone who didn't want to be saved, I explain. But now I'm saving someone who does. Me. After we hang up, I stay outside for another hour, listening to the night sounds of my neighborhood. Dogs barking in the distance, teenagers laughing as they walk past, the hum of air conditioners keeping families cool. These are the sounds of other people's lives, and for the first time in my 45 years, I'm not desperately trying to fix them or earn their love. I'm just living my own life, quietly and completely, in a place where I'm wanted exactly as I am. Tomorrow, I'll start my new job, helping people who appreciate my care. This weekend, I'll plant flowers in my overgrown garden. Next month, I might take that pottery class I've always wanted to try. But tonight, I'm exactly where I belong, in a home I chose, living a life that's finally, truly mine. The stars shine brighter when you're not looking at them through tears of exhaustion. And love feels deeper when it flows both ways. I quote, "We learned the difference between a house and a home, between being needed and being valued, between sacrifice and self-respect. And I've learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is loving yourself enough to walk away."